All right, for questions 7 through 9, the directions are important. Solve for the indicated value in each parallelogram. So it is very, very, very important that they tell us that these are parallelograms because we can apply all of the properties that we know about parallelograms to these problems. So on number 7, let's look at number 7 first. Number 7, we're solving for A and we're solving for B. So the very first property we know about these angles of a parallelogram is that the opposite angles in a parallelogram are going to be congruent to each other. So I'm actually going to mark that in colors. If this angle is 101, its opposite angle is also going to be congruent. Its angle that is going to be consecutive to it is going to be supplementary. So these two angles are going to be congruent, the two yellow ones, and then a yellow plus a purple are going to have a sum of 180 degrees all the way around the shape. Okay. So if the purple one is 101 degrees, immediately I know that angle B has to also be 101 degrees. So this is 101 immediately because opposite angles in a parallelogram are congruent to each other. If that is true, how do I find angle A? Well, angle A is going to be supplementary to either of these 101s. So I could add those here or I could add those here. Either way, those add up to 180 degrees. So I'm going to take my sum of 180 and I'm going to subtract 101, and that is going to give me what is left for angle A. That is going to give me 79 degrees. So it doesn't ask me for the other one. This is 79 degrees. This would also be 79 degrees. A quick way to check it is that all four of these still have an interior angle sum of 360 degrees. So those are my answers for A and for B in this parallelogram. But I only knew that because the directions told me that this was a parallelogram. All right, in number 8, the properties of a parallelogram tell me that opposite sides of a parallelogram are congruent. So this piece right here, 18, this side length, is going to be equal to A minus 10. So what I can do is I can take A minus 10 and I can set that equal to 18. So if I add 10 to both sides, because those sides are congruent, I'll get A equals 28. So A must be 28, which would make both of those pieces equal to 18 units in length. Okay, so how do I solve for B? I've now solved for A, but how do I solve for B? Well, what is happening at B is I've got an angle marked right here, and then I've got a 103 on the opposite side. So remember that my properties of a parallelogram tell me that these angles are going to be congruent to each other. So this angle is going to be congruent to its opposite angle. And so I can take B plus 16, this green angle, and I can set it equal to 103. B plus 16 equals 103. And I'm going to, when I subtract 16 from both sides, I'm going to get 87. So B would be 87. Those have to be opposite angles in a parallelogram because it told me it's a parallelogram are congruent to each other. Number 9 has some pieces of a diagonal. Now I do like to mark these. D plus 4 is talking about this piece of the diagonal. I'll do this in colors. 14 is talking about this pink piece of the diagonal. 11 is talking about this yellow piece of this diagonal. And then C plus 5 is talking about this purple piece of the diagonal. So what do we know about the diagonals in a parallelogram? Well, because it told me it's a parallelogram, we know that the diagonals of a parallelogram bisect each other. So green is going to be equal to pink. So I can set the green equal to the pink by saying 14 is going to be equal to D plus 4. That diagonal gets bisected by the other diagonal. And so what do I get for D? I'm going to get D equals 10. So D is 10. Then that yellow piece, 11, is going to be equal to the purple piece. That diagonal gets bisected. This parallelogram. So C plus 5 equals 11. So C is going to be equal to 6. So we were able to solve this problem because it told me in the directions that this was a parallelogram, and the diagonals are going to cut each other in half in a parallelogram. So there is 6 and 10. All right, the next set of directions say solve for the indicated values in each shape. So what's important on these problems is that it does tell you what kind of shape each one of these is from the start. So this is a rectangle. So immediately when I see the word rectangle, we know by definition, just basic definition, a rectangle contains 4 right angles. So I'm going to go ahead and throw those in there from the very beginning. Something tricky about a rectangle is there are a lot of angles going on. So what I like to go ahead and mark is the angles that are going to be congruent to each other. So we know that the diagonals, these 4 pieces, are going to be congruent to each other because the diagonals are congruent and they bisect each other because it's a parallelogram. The diagonals are congruent because it's a rectangle. They bisect each other because it's a parallelogram. So what this does is it creates 2 different isosceles triangles that are going to be congruent. These two green ones are going to be congruent to each other, this one and this one. So I can copy that left side to that right side. And then I can copy this bottom triangle, this isosceles triangle, with a 31 in it, to the top. So immediately, what does that help me do? That's going to help me fill in some missing angles. So if this is 31, this angle is going to be 31 as well. This angle is going to be 31 degrees. And then this angle is going to be 31 degrees. So how do I find what is left for the rest of the right angle? I'm going to do 90 minus 31. Well, 90 minus 31 is going to give me 59 degrees for each of these purple angles. So I'm just going ahead and copying in all of the angles possible. So how do I find this angle that I'm about to put a dot on right here? AEB, that is going to be 180 minus 31 minus 31. So 180 minus 31. Goodness, y'all know. It should be 118. I double checked it. Yes, it is 118 degrees. So if that's 118 degrees, 118, vertical angles, this one's going to be 118. And then you could either go linear pair or I could go green. 180 minus 59 is going to give me 62. So let me change colors. This red angle is going to be 62 degrees. This red angle is going to be 62 degrees. So this is just using isosceles triangles that are congruent in this rectangle. So now I found every single angle. Now we just have to see what they're looking for. So what is E to B to C? I've noticed that some of my students struggle with the angles and seeing which one it's talking about. So we're just going to trace it. E to B to C would be from E to B to C, where the vertex is right here. So what is that angle? That angle is going to be 59 degrees. That's one of my purple angles. So what is BEC? So going the other way, B to E to C, that is going to be 62 degrees. That's this angle right here, 62 degrees. All right, what is DAE? D to A to E. D to A to E, where this is the angle in the middle, that is 59 degrees. And what is A to E to B? A to E to B, that is going to give me 118 degrees right there. So now I filled in every single angle, and that is all they could possibly ask me about. And so I answered the 4 that they asked me for, but I could have filled in any single one that they would have given me just knowing the properties of a rectangle, since they told me it was a rectangle from the beginning. So same thing with a rhombus. What are the properties of a rhombus? Well, by basic definition, we know that since it's a rhombus, there are 4 congruent sides. We also know that the diagonals are going to be perpendicular to each other. So that's the information I copy in every single time I see a rhombus. I also know that in a rhombus, the opposite angles get bisected. So all 4 of these black angles around this diagonal are going to be congruent. And then all 4 of these yellow angles around this shorter diagonal are going to be congruent to each other. So this creates 4 right triangles. So how do I solve for x? Well, it looks like, based on where it's at, it looks like that I have x pointing to this black dot, and I have 3x plus 10x minus 23 pointing to that black dot, and then 3x plus 19 pointing to this other black dot. We know that this diagonal bisects that angle, and so that means it cuts it in half, which tells me that these are going to be congruent to each other. So I can set 10x minus 23 equal to 3x plus 19. I'm going to go through the math pretty quick here. So what we're going to do is we're going to get 7x equals 42. So x is going to be equal to 6. If you need help with the algebra, just come see me. So how do I find the measure of VST? That's going to be this dot right here. It's going to be the same as the other angle. So let's just plug it into one of these. 10 times 6 is going to give me 60. And 60 minus 23 should give me, what do? We did 10 times 6 is 60. And then we subtracted 23. So that each of those black dot angles is going to be 37 each. So every single one of these is 37. I could plug it into either of these expressions, and I'm going to get a 37-degree angle. So then it wants to know, well, what is URV? URV, starting at U, going to R, going to V, is going to be one of these smaller yellow angles that have a yellow dot on. What I'm going to do is, this is a right triangle, and so I'm going to do 180 minus 90 minus 37. And when you do that, you should get 53, which we did. So all of these yellow angles are going to be 53 degrees each. So all of the yellows are 53 as well. So you could always fill in all of the pieces just based on the properties. And then that way, no matter what they ask you for, you have the answers. So what is U to T to S? That is both of these 53s. U to T to S is this whole thing. That's going to be 53 plus 53, which is 106 degrees. So now I've got all 4 of these answers. Again, they could have asked me for more, but those are the ones that they specified. But now I've got every single angle in this picture possible. 4 right angles in the middle, the 53s around one diagonal on each side, the 37s around the other diagonal on each side. Okay, so anytime you see a rhombus and you see the angles marked, that's the first thing I mark is I color code it. All right, I do want to mark this different just to show that that 53-degree angle is going to be the same as the other one. All right, I will make a new video for the next few.